majority of women who are suicidal because of an unwanted pregnancy are still travelling. I don't think we are treating the women who are suicidal because of unwanted pregnancies in Ireland. I think we're treating the women who are suicidal with unwanted pregnancies who are unable to travel. We're treating them in Ireland. So far, 7 women theoretically have had their lives saved by the legislation. So obviously that's a very good thing in itself. And it's a very good thing that we have legislation that will save women's lives if their lives are at risk because of being pregnant. So in that sense, I think the legislation has worked. But it is very clumsy legislation. And the majority of my colleagues feel very uncomfortable with trying to work within this legislation. It's very difficult for women. It requires, obviously, as most people here probably know, but it requires 3 assessments, 3 specialist assessments, but it also requires that the woman would go to a GP or an A&E doctor who would initially refer her. So in order to have a legal abortion because of a risk of suicide, a woman will have to see a minimum of 5 doctors. And if one of those doctors is unwilling to see her, the process is clearly lengthened. And that has happened quite a lot with this legislation. As I said, colleagues feel uncomfortable with it. They don't want to deal with it. A woman presents to them, referred by the GP or the A&E department. They say, I'm not comfortable with this. Call me a conscientious objector. And they ring up their clinical director. The clinical director says, call me a conscientious objector. I'm not comfortable with this legislation. And they ring up another colleague, and it may escalate up to a national level, and they may have to call on a psychiatrist from a national panel. But there's usually a period of delay where the woman does not know what's happening because nobody knows what's happening. And then she may see somebody who says, well, actually, I don't think you fulfilled the criteria. So the whole process has to start all over again. So it's extremely distressing for a woman who is feeling suicidal, who is pregnant, highly vulnerable, to have to repeat her story to everyone, because every time she tells the story, it's an emotional journey and it takes its emotional toll on her. And this is in somebody who's suicidal. I mean, in my own practice, I try to minimize the number of people that my sick patients have to talk to. So I would say, no, you don't need to, if they're clerked in an A&E, I say, fine, I'll see them next. You don't need to clerk them in again in the ward. So the repetitive intrusion into their extremely private crisis, I think is in itself, it's counter to good, sensitive practice.